My name is Rebecca Sterling, and the night my marriage ended began with a piece of plastic slid across a marble counter. The lodge was called Highridge Summit, tucked into the mountains outside Boulder, the kind of place where wealth pretends to be quiet. The air smelled like pine and polished wood, men in tailored jackets laughed too loudly, women in silk dresses moved like they owned the view. I arrived alone. At the check-in table, a young woman avoided my eyes. Her hands hesitated, then she pushed a name tag toward me. I picked it up without thinking. Rebecca, event staff. I looked at it for a second too long. Before I could say anything, my mother-in-law appeared beside me in a pale gold gown, smiling the way people do when they finally stop pretending to be kind. She glanced at the badge and nodded with satisfaction. "Perfect," she said, loud enough for the people nearby to hear. "Staff enters from the side tonight." Around us, conversations slowed. Someone turned their head, someone else pretended not to stare. I clipped the badge to my dress and walked into the ballroom. The main table sat under the largest chandelier, 8 place settings, 7 chairs, one space empty, directly beside my husband. James Sterling arrived 20 minutes later, relaxed, confident, already holding a glass of whiskey. He noticed the badge. He noticed the empty chair. Then he laughed. It was the same warm laugh he used when a deal closed in his favor. "Relax, Rebecca," he said, reaching past me for a wine glass that was not meant for him. "Food is for family." 5 years of marriage. 3 years of waking before dawn to fix companies he never had time to look at. 18 months of quietly saving his father's business so the Sterling name would not collapse. And I was not family enough for a chair. I reached for my ring. The diamond caught the light as I slid it off, slowly, deliberately. I placed it in the center of the empty place setting. The soft sound it made against the linen carried farther than the music. Then I spoke, calm, clear. "I am no longer your wife." The room went silent. James stopped smiling. 300 people watched as I turned, walked past the tables, past the whispers, past the valet stand, and stepped into the cold mountain night. My hands did not shake. Not yet. Before I became Rebecca Sterling, the woman with no chair, I was just Rebecca Parker from Dayton, Ohio. I grew up in a small house with thin walls and a mother who worked 2 jobs and never complained. She taught me early that stability was built, not announced. You showed up, you paid your bills, you kept going even when no one was watching. I paid my way through college, waiting tables and studying accounting at night. Numbers made sense to me when people often did not. I learned how businesses failed not because owners were cruel, but because they ignored quiet problems for too long. Cash flow gaps, bad contracts, pride disguised as optimism. After graduation, I did not chase prestige. I chased usefulness. I took consulting work no one else wanted. Failing factories, struggling restaurants, family businesses 1 bad quarter away from closing their doors. I listened more than I spoke. I fixed what could be fixed. When things worked again, I stepped back. That is how I met James. He was sharp, charming, and ambitious. He liked to talk about growth and legacy and doing things bigger than the generation before him. He told me I was the smartest woman he had ever met. He said we were a team. I believed him. When we married, I did not stop working. I just moved quietly. While James built his name in finance, I built systems that kept other people's lights on. I liked being behind the scenes. I thought partnership meant trust. When his family talked about money, they talked loudly. When I talked about money, I talked carefully. I did not need applause. I needed results. At dinners, his mother would introduce me as James' wife who keeps busy. People smiled politely and moved on. I told myself it did not matter. That respect would come with time. I chose not to correct anyone. I chose not to take credit. I chose not to notice how often my work was minimized while his potential was praised. There is a moment many capable people reach where they confuse patience with loyalty, where they believe that if they stay steady long enough, someone will finally see them clearly. That was who I was. Not weak, not naive. Just convinced that being useful was enough to belong. I was wrong. The first real crack appeared when the Sterling Manufacturing Company started to fail. It was the kind of business people love to brag about. 3rd generation, American-made. Dozens of families depending on it, and it was bleeding cash. James was traveling, conferences, investor dinners, deals that looked impressive from the outside. His father sat at the kitchen table staring at spreadsheets he did not understand and talking about legacy like it was a life raft. No one asked me to help. I stepped in anyway. I spent my days inside the factory walking the floor with managers who were exhausted and scared. I spent my nights rebuilding budgets line by line. I renegotiated supplier contracts. I reworked production schedules. I found equipment that was costing more to run than it was worth and made the hard call to let it go. It was not dramatic work, it was necessary work. I explained it to James once like this: imagine your house has a cracked foundation. You can repaint the walls all you want, but eventually the whole thing collapses. Someone has to dig down and fix what no one sees. That someone was me. Over 18 months the company stabilized, orders returned, payroll stopped being a weekly panic, hundreds of people kept their jobs. The Sterling name survived. At the family celebration dinner, James stood and accepted congratulations. He talked about difficult decisions and strong leadership. His father squeezed his shoulder with pride. No one mentioned my name. Later that night, James thanked me in bed. His voice was half asleep. He said I should not work so hard and rolled over. I told myself that was enough. I told myself that credit inside a marriage did not need an audience. But something shifted after that. His mother wore new jewelry and spoke about resilience. Their friends talked about how impressive James was under pressure. When someone asked what I did, James smiled and said consulting here and there. Here and there. I kept records because that is how my mind works. Every adjustment, every approval, every decision that saved them money or kept the doors open. Not because I wanted proof, but because I had learned that stories change when power is involved. At the time I still believed love would protect us from that. I still believed that the work mattered even if my name did not. That belief did not survive much longer. After the company recovered, the disrespect did not stop. It just became quieter. At dinners, James would interrupt me mid-sentence and finish my thought incorrectly. When I corrected him, he would laugh and say I was being too technical. His friends nodded as if that explained everything. His mother had a way of praising me that felt like a warning. She would say things like, "Rebecca is so helpful," or "We are lucky she keeps herself occupied," always smiling, always diminishing. When people asked about my work, she redirected the conversation to James' future. I told myself she was old-fashioned, that she did not know any better. There were moments that should have mattered more than they did. The time James called my consulting work a little side thing during a dinner with investors. The time he suggested I dress more colorfully so I did not look so serious beside him. The way my successes were treated as background noise while his potential was treated as prophecy. Each moment alone was easy to excuse. Together they formed a pattern I was not ready to name. I worked harder. I stayed quieter. I believed loyalty meant endurance. There is a particular loneliness that comes from being respected for what you provide but not for who you are. You become useful in a way that erases you. I would stand in our closet some nights folding James' shirts exactly the way he liked them. 1 inch of starch at the collar, no wrinkles, precision care. I cried in the shower so he would not hear. Not because I wanted to leave, but because part of me still wanted to be chosen. Still wanted someone to notice that I was tired. He never did. Instead, he thanked me for being easy. For not making things complicated. For understanding how his world worked. I mistook his comfort for love. By the time I realized the difference, I had already learned how to disappear. The moment everything became clear did not happen in a fight. It happened on an ordinary evening when I came home carrying groceries and heard James' voice through the bedroom door. He was on the phone, laughing, relaxed in a way he never was with me anymore. "She still thinks her consulting actually matters," he said. "Can you believe that?" I stopped in the hallway. The bags grew heavy in my hands. Then his mother answered through the speaker, calm, amused, precise. "It matters enough to keep her busy. That is the point. At the engagement party she will finally understand where she fits." James laughed again. That same easy laugh. "We will give her a badge or something. Make it clear without making a scene." They spoke about it like they were planning table settings. Like I was furniture that needed to be moved. I set the groceries down quietly. Milk did not spill. Nothing broke. I walked into my office and sat at the desk in the dark. For a long time I did nothing but breathe. In that moment I understood something I had been avoiding for years. I was not misunderstood. I was managed. The respect I kept waiting for was never coming because the arrangement worked perfectly for them. I opened a folder on my computer. It was labeled insurance. Inside were files I had kept out of habit, expense reports that did not align, personal purchases routed through portfolio companies, patterns that only appear when someone believes no one is watching closely. I had never planned to use them. I believed marriage meant protection, even from the worst version of someone you love. That night I stopped believing that. I did not feel angry. I felt finished. I stayed at my desk until dawn, organizing documents and writing notes with the same calm focus I used to fix failing businesses. This was not revenge, it was accountability. Upstairs, James slept peacefully. In the morning, he kissed my cheek and reminded me not to overdress for the party. I smiled and nodded. He had no idea that the woman he was trying to shrink had already stepped away. He thought the conversation was private. It was not. It was permission. Highridge Summit Lodge glowed against the dark mountain like it always did on nights that mattered. Glass walls, timber beams, money dressed as nature. I arrived alone. James had left hours earlier for drinks with friends, which meant no one noticed me walking through the doors until I reached the check-in table. The woman behind it hesitated before sliding the badge toward me. Her apology was in her eyes, not her voice. Rebecca Sterling, event staff. I clipped it to my dress and kept moving. Inside the ballroom, the sound was thick, laughter, crystal, confidence. Our table sat beneath the largest chandelier, exactly where it always did. 8 place settings, 7 chairs. The empty space waited for me like an instruction. People noticed. They always do when someone breaks a rule quietly. James arrived late. He was flushed from whiskey and success. He saw the badge. He saw the missing chair. He did not look surprised. He laughed. "Relax, Rebecca," he said, reaching past me for a glass of wine meant for someone else. "Food is for family." The room leaned in, waiting for me to apologize, to joke, to step aside. Instead, I stood still. I reached for my ring and slid it off slowly. The diamond caught the chandelier light as I placed it in the center of the empty place setting. The sound it made against the linen cut through the music. I spoke without raising my voice. "I am no longer your wife." The laughter stopped. Conversations froze. Someone dropped a fork. James stared at me like I had spoken in another language. I did not wait for him to respond. I turned and walked out, past the tables, past the whispers, past the people who would tell this story for years, and stepped into the cold mountain air. The valet handed me my keys with shaking hands. I thanked him. As I drove down the mountain, the city lights spread out below me like something new. I pulled over at a turnout and finally let myself shake. Not from fear. From relief. Afe. Then I took out my phone and sent one message to the only person who needed to hear it. "Execute everything tonight." That was all. By the time I reached home, the first accounts were frozen. I never went back. What happened next did not unfold in a dramatic rush. It moved the way truth usually does when it is finally allowed to surface. Quietly, methodically, without asking for permission. By the next morning, the firm where James worked was holding emergency meetings he was not invited to attend. Accounts he once controlled were locked. Emails went unanswered. His name disappeared from shared calendars before anyone officially explained why. I did not call him. I did not watch. I focused on my work. Regulators followed the documentation exactly where it led them. There was no scandal headline. No spectacle, just consequences that arrived with signatures and sealed envelopes. James lost access to the world that had once bent around him. Partnerships dissolved. Investors distanced themselves. The reputation he had built on charm and confidence collapsed under the weight of records he assumed no one understood well enough to question. He tried to reach me once. A short message, careful words, no apology, just confusion that I no longer existed where he expected me to be. I did not respond. His mother sold the house quietly months later. The jewelry stopped appearing. The invitations stopped coming. Power is loud when it arrives and very quiet when it leaves. People asked me how I felt. I told them the truth. I felt clear. I had not destroyed anything that did not already deserve to fall. I had simply stopped holding it upright. For the first time in years, I slept through the night. Not because everything was perfect, but because nothing was pretending anymore. Walking away did not make me lonely. It made me honest. I moved into a small temporary office while I decided what came next. No views, no marble, just a clean desk, a white wall, and silence that belonged to me. I named the firm Northline Advisory because I wanted something that pointed forward, not backward. Clients found me the way people usually do when they are running out of options. Quietly, carefully, with hope they were trying not to show. They were not glamorous companies, a logistics firm in Michigan, a family-owned supplier in Ohio, a brewery trying to keep 3 generations employed. They did not care who I had been married to. They cared that I listened, that I told them the truth, that I stayed until the work was done. Word spread. Not fast, not loud, but steadily. One afternoon, James' younger sister showed up unannounced. She stood in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee and an apology she did not know how to phrase. We sat on the floor because I had not bought chairs yet and talked about things we had never been allowed to say out loud. She left the family business a month later. That was when I understood something important. Leaving does not always mean burning bridges. Sometimes it means refusing to stand on ones that were never built to hold you. I worked less but accomplished more. I stopped proving myself and started choosing myself. The difference was immediate. For the first time, my life felt aligned. Not impressive. Aligned. There is one object on the wall of my office that always stops people. It is a name badge in a simple black frame. Rebecca Sterling, event staff. Clients ask about it once they feel comfortable. Sometimes they laugh. Sometimes they look confused. I tell them the truth. That badge was the moment I stopped asking for permission to belong. For years I believed that if I worked hard enough, stayed loyal enough, stayed quiet enough, I would earn a seat at the table. What I learned instead is that some tables are designed to keep you useful, not respected. Losing my seat that night did not diminish me. It clarified me. I no longer measure my worth by proximity to power or approval from people who benefit from my silence. I build my own tables now. I choose who sits at them, people who listen, people who tell the truth even when it is uncomfortable, people who do not need me to shrink so they can feel tall. If you are listening to this and you recognize yourself in my story, I want you to hear this clearly. Being excluded is not always rejection. Sometimes it is direction. Sometimes the empty chair is not punishment, it is permission. Permission to leave what no longer honors you. Permission to stop explaining your value. Permission to choose yourself without apology. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it resonated with you, please like and share it so it can reach someone who needs it. And if you have ever been quietly pushed aside, tell me your story in the comments. You are not invisible. You are just standing at the wrong table.